Like and subscribe in the next 5 seconds, or this will be in your bed tonight. Teachers of I. What are some signs that a student is being abused or lives in a toxic environment? In high school, kids who don't ever seem to want to go home at the end of the day, who seem less happy act out before or after school holidays. Same for elementary, they come in early to help. They stay after dismissal to help you clean. And they don't move quickly if their car number is called. Edit. Yawl. These are not hard and fast signs. Some of my very happy kiddos with homes that appear to be solid are like this because they enjoy hanging out with me. But when students appear to want as much time away from home as possible, my ears start to prick up. Second edit. At schools in the US, car riders are often given a tag to hang off their adult rear view mirror. The tag either has their students' names or a number that is called out, and that is their number and thus assigned to go. I unironically just really enjoyed cleaning and tidying up the classroom. 9-12 teacher. Only 3 times have I had to call the abuse hotline. Twice I noticed at lunch duty. In one case a kid was bringing a lunch consistently that would consist of stuff like a single piece of bread and a container of pop. But not even a real container, like a can or a bottle. It was like a Tupperware container. Other case, a girl went from typical happy teenager to choosing to sit by herself in the corner and not talk to anyone. I asked one of her former friends she would sit with, a girl who was previously in my class whom I had a good relationship with, if something was up, what had happened, etc. And she got super upset and said all the girl would say is that her stepdad was back living with them. I took that one to guidance and they ultimately had me call along with them to voice our concern. Third one was a neglect issue. Kid would show up filthy, starving. I keep granola bars etc. in a cabinet in case a kid is hungry, didn't have a lunch. And this kid would clean me out. And not in a teenager shithead I just want snacks man way but a super apologetic way. Thing is, I never heard back from CPS for any of them with the exception being the girl with the stepdad back in her life. And even that I just had to give a statement to police. It's weird that they never fill you in. Edit. Spelling. Edit 2. Thank you all for the award symbols. But if you're spending real money on these, please consider donating that money to somewhere like www.nakidhungry.org instead. Cheers. I've always been too afraid to ask for food or accept it when offered, even when I came to school on a completely empty stomach. No lunch. And no lunch money. Honestly, good on that kid for being able to do that at all. When I was in elementary school they would give you a PB&J if you didn't have lunch money, but I had sensory issues that prevented me from eating them. So I would just not eat and buy our milk from the snack bar. One of my classmates' moms was the snack bar lunch lady. The snack bar was separate from the regular lunch line, and I usually had a quarter or two to get milk or sometimes a snack or just one or the other, but not enough to get a real lunch. She noticed pretty quickly that I wasn't eating real food and she just started giving me lunch with my daily milk purchase. No questions asked, no other adults involved or notified. I love you, Mrs. Book. Band teacher here. A lot of times when teaching kids in beginning band how to play their instruments early on you have to touch various body parts. Hands of course, arms, hips and shoulders for getting them into proper posture alignment. I always ask before I touch anywhere, is it okay if I touch your? Almost all kids say yes. I've had 2 that have said no. One was a student with autism and did not want to be touched, and the other turns out was being abused at home. It's not a guarantee of course, but often a sign. Kudos for giving them body autonomy by asking first. This jolted an unexpected memory from high school. We had a gym teacher who would always help the kids jump when we did gymnastics exercises, and somehow he always seemed to miss grab when a girl was jumping, butt, groin, you name it. With boys his hand placement was immaculate, but with the girls he always grabbed parts by accident. All the girls were talking about it, saying what a pervert he was. I don't think anyone ever reported him though. Edit. I did not expect this to blow up. So sorry so many of you experienced similar awful things. Hugs. Red heart. I did gymnastics when I was younger, and I had one of those coaches. I wouldn't say she was a pervert as such, but she would always slap our butts and run her hands all along our bodies while spotting us. I'm aware it's for safety precautions, but a couple of us started to feel really uncomfortable by it. I finally hit my breaking point when we were planking I drum what exercise exactly, but we had our backs and butts faced upwards, and she came along and slapped my butt and told me off for bad posture, which really caught me off guard. I ended up yelling at her, and from that lesson onwards she refused to even acknowledge my existence, lol. In all honesty, it was worth it, BC. She didn't bother me ever again. I ended up quitting a couple months later after my parents realized I was miserable with her as my coach. I didn't tell them about her, so I quit. Turns out she got fired a week after I quit for an unrelated reason. Not sure if I should be upset because she was the coach of our whole country's gym team, but I'm just glad she stopped bothering me after that whole incident. I should add that in my 9 years of doing gymnastics as a kid, I have never had a teacher that slapped our asses and yelled at us so vigorously for messing up. She was racist at times too, but I won't go into that. Edit. Despite English being my first language, I wrote this while delirious and didn't realize the shit grammar and word choices until actually coming back to life. I sincerely apologize for making you read this monstrosity of an answer. Many kids who are verbally abused will do the same to peers they think less of, or to younger kids. If a kid is calling someone horrible things, often things that kids should not say like swear words or violent threats, for a minor offense like being annoying, they learned that from someone at home. You can tell the difference between learning it from an adult and just repeating something they heard on TV because they will genuinely, really mean it and you can hear it in their voice. Quoting something they heard on TV doesn't usually have a context the way that genuine rage does. Honestly, a kid who is just in rage all the time is a huge red flag for me, especially if they're under like 10. I had one kid that other teachers had written off as a bad kid. I thought he was a sweet but angry kid. I worked out a system with him where he had freedom to express himself in class, but if he was getting too loud or wound up, I would calmly touch his shoulder and move on. It was a subtle reminder to be in control of his own emotions. He had a rough home life. His parents were addicts and out of the picture. His older brother regularly used him as a punching bag. His older sister was pregnant and barely 15 and living with his strict nan and so many other things. It was no wonder the kid was angry. I recognized that and spent the time listening to him. By the time I left the school, it was a 3-month placement. He'd moved up a banding to a higher level class. They realized that he was actually pretty smart. He'd just never been given a chance. That was 11 years ago, and I think of Jay often. Edit. Thank you kind strangers for your kind rewards. I had a bad kid Jay also. I asked some kids to draw me a little picture of something they liked on some Nauticats, and this boy drew a stripper on a pole with little dollar bills around her. Another kid drew Fetty Wap. This was a 2nd grade class. Turned out the kids just had really rough home lives, like you describe. Mom is only 24 and working full time, then parties with guys her age in her off time, sleeping on various friends and family's couches with the kids in tow because that's what's available. They're really good kids. They just have the most ridiculous obstacles. Thanks to online school, I can just look and see. One sign is constant full blast music or screaming in the background. Kids or adults fighting or yelling the background. Kids fight the student trying to learn on camera. Edit. Change healing to music. My cousin had a kid in her class whose parents were screaming at one of the kid's siblings in the background back when classes first went online. The kid forgot to mute himself when he first logged in, and the teacher apparently looked very worried, even after the kid apologized and muted his camera. My cousin said it was very disturbing, and a lot of her classmates were shaken up by it. Apologizing for your ducked up parents breaks my heart. I had a terrible experience as a student who was abused at home. At one point I had a black eye every month or so. Once I had to do PE in shorts and I had a huge black spot on my inner thighs which spread from the genitalia almost to the knee. I always told people I fell from my bike. Broke crying out of nowhere regularly. My grades were awful and I had to repeat one entire year. I was a teenager and actually asked for help to the school counselor, which, after listening to me, said, "Since your younger sister is involved, we'd have to act and call the police. If you don't want, we can just pretend we didn't have this talk." I was scared so nothing actually happened. She left me with a bunch of sort of propaganda pamphlets. She was into politics in my school town. asking me to give them to random people. Teachers kept on treating me like a rebellious teenager with behavioral problems, even though they made many talks about speaking up to the teacher if we had problems at home or we were being abused. This was Milan, Italy, 5 to 10 years ago. Now I can usually recognize anyone who had been beaten or abused at home when they were kids in a short conversation. I'm so sorry this happened to you. My heart hurts for you. I don't know what the rules on mandated reporting are in Italy, but that counselor should have taken action and reported it. Any of those teachers should have. Honestly, I'm so sorry that basically everyone failed you. I hope you're doing better now. My partner's mum is a teaching assistant in a classroom. She said one of the most worrying things she hears is, "Can I tell you a secret?" A lot of the time it's very innocent, but it always sets off alarm bells first. We have told our children since a very young age, we don't have secrets, we have surprises. A birthday or holiday gift is something we don't tell the person for a short time, and it's something fun for us and them. A secret is something that someone would want you to never tell, and a good grown-up will never tell a kid to keep a secret from another grown-up. If grown-ups have a problem or something they need help with, they will tell a grown-up, not a child. So the first thing you are to do is tell mama and daddy as soon as you see us. If another child tells you a secret, you are to also tell us immediately, because the child might need a grown-up's help. My MILF frequently gets tattled on after telling the kids to keep the extra cookie or candy a secret. Haha, that last line made me happy in this thread of sadness. You have good kiddos. One sign of physical abuse, including severe beatings, is when students dress to cover every inch of their bodies. It's especially noticeable during times of warmer weather when most students are wearing far less. These abused students have scars so searing that they can't sit back in a chair normally due to the pain from sores. Other telltale signs include occasional facial bruises or wounds to lips where they've been punched. This 100%. I taught middle school, and some of my female students especially wore giant sweatshirts and long pants. Even in sweltering FL heat, those students often wound up being able in abusive situations of some sort. Those signs particularly combined with hypersensitivity, avoidance of parents, and occasionally signs of disordered eating. As a teenage girl trying to regain control of my own body, I used to wear the biggest and baggiest sweatshirts to make myself look less attractive and to hopefully cover up my body. The Florida heat was nothing compared to how I felt about myself. Add in the anorexia so that I could have some semblance of control over my life, and I was a recipe for disaster. 90 pounds soaking wet who flinched as soon as someone started yelling or breaking out into a nervous sweat if a guy so much as looked at me. My perspective is high school, grade 7-12. Difference in how they treat male and female teachers. I have had quite a few students who I can tell have had pretty toxic fathers because they project their issues onto me as a male teacher. Overly sensitive kids. No healthy environment produces a kid who's extremely emotionally unstable in high school. There will be a toxic or abusive environment somewhere in their life. Bullying, home life or otherwise. Off comments that slip out because the kid feels it's somewhat normal but it's way off what's normal. Like, "Don't worry sir, it's just that I got 8 hours of sleep last week." The content of their art that they doodle in the margins. How they deal with other kids. Hyperaggression or power plays are red flags. How they deal with knowing they've got an answer wrong. Those who are from toxic environments can be very fearful of retribution for any imperfection from them. Doing things just for the sake of being in control of that thing. I have a student who shaves their eyebrows off, and another who will purposely be a few minutes late to every one of my classes. I caught them on time once by accident and they walked right out to come back in a few moments later, so they were late. I scared my art teacher once, and it took me a while to realize what I had done. Mostly because he was super strict himself, so it was weird to see him unsettled. My theme for my art GCSE was man vs nature, but I did a weird spin on it, focusing mostly on death and decay as a metaphor for the destruction of nature. Anyway, while I was in the middle of drawing at once, a teacher came to visit the art class. She was part of what we called the UNED, where students with physical and mental disabilities would mostly be taught. This wasn't unusual because there was a disabled student in my class. so no one really thought much of anything. What was unusual was the fact that she looked at people's artworks under the facade of just being nosy, until she got to me where she basically interviewed me for a solid 10 minutes. Nothing came of it. But it wasn't until later where I was like, did I just get assessed for mental trauma? Turns out that I was very mentally ill with anxiety and depression, and focusing on death in my artwork was a way for me to cope with suicidal ideations. I of course didn't find out how sick I was until I was in university, but it baffles me that they decided to go about it this way. I like that they found out yet didn't seem to help you at all. Apologizing a lot, flinching when someone's hand is raised, being yelled at, or loud noises, avoiding confrontation or eye contact, but that could also be something else, willing to make a fool of themselves for attention, acting out, etc. Edit. My heart goes out to all of you who've been through abuse and have to live with the consequences of it. I hope things get better and that everyone could heal and move forward. My kids apologize all the time for the most innocuous of things. It used to really upset me because I thought I was being too hard on them, and I made a mental note to check my behavior/language around them. That's when I realized that I apologized to and for everything, and they had just picked up my ridiculous habit. I have been watching for apologizing for my husband because his counselor wants him to apologize 3 times a day or less. I never realized how bad it had gotten. Swedish teacher here. In Sweden, my mom was a principal for almost 30 years at a school for kids aged 6-12. So she'd seen some bad shit during her years. She didn't tell me everything because of non-disclosure agreements on her part, but she did tell me some things. One such thing was a young girl from Somalia. She and her parents went back to Somalia on vacation, and when they got back, the girl told one of the staffers that she had been cut with scissors down there. Now, female genital mutilation is quite common in Somalia and Eastern Africa, and extremely illegal in Sweden, so the law forces you to call Child Protective Services if you even suspect something's afoot. So the staffer did, and the CPS and police show up and place the girl in protective custody, and the parents are arrested and held in custody. The girl goes to a hospital and is examined, and it turns out the whole thing was a lie. The parents are furious and remove their kid from that school and threatens legal action. As far as I know, nothing came of it. Edit. To clarify, the parents weren't put in jail. They were being held by the police until their daughter had gone through a medical examination. It's better to be safe than sorry. The majority of children who speak of abuse are telling the truth. I'd rather risk a mad parent than leaving a child in an abusive situation. The one time I had to call CPS, they said if you're wrong you could get in trouble. First of all, WTF. Secondly, my answer, as I'm sobbing, was I hope I am wrong. Thankfully I was wrong. I did not get in trouble. The dad hated me, but he already hated me. The girl was in my kindergarten class. She started wetting herself, lashing out, had blood in her panties, said it hurt to use the restroom. We told mom she needed to take her to the doctor. We never got any follow-up. Now what would you think as a teacher if this has gone on for a couple of weeks now? Turns out the girl had a bad UT confirmed at the doctor's, but mom never told us she had taken her or followed up with us when we expressed our concerns. But what was I supposed to do as a mandatory report? Risk not calling and get in trouble if abuse is happening? Or risk calling and get in trouble if there is no abuse? Messed up. In addition to teaching kids to tell a trusted adult once abuse has occurred, it's so important to teach kids to report signs of grooming as well. Some that we've told our kids are, if anyone gives you an icky feeling, even if you don't know the reason, tell us, we will trust you, and we will keep you safe from them. Asking you to keep secrets about anything. Often abusers will start with innocuous secrets, frequently initiating touch with you, inviting you to sit on their lap. Back rubs, wrestling, tickling, hugs and kisses that are longer than usual or at unusual times, grandma offering a hug when we're leaving versus randomly in the middle of a visit. Much like with secrets, abusers often start with innocent touches to warm their victims up to them, picking you out as the favorite in a group of peers and giving you special privileges or gifts, asking questions or commenting about your development, hygiene, or bathroom habits, or talking about theirs. Trying to get you alone in a group setting, telling you that you are very grown up for your age, so you should be able to do things more grown up people do. If you see someone do these things to anybody else, Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more interviews.